What is up, you guys? Welcome to another episode on the Faithfully Fit Motherhood podcast. Thank you for joining me today. We are talking about whether or not to track calories and macros and what that looks like, the pros and cons, all that good stuff. So, I want to start off by saying that I actually only started recently tracking calories and macros just because in my past, my method when I first started fitness was restriction. So that was about 10 years ago. And that was my method. So I never really got into that type of thing. But now recently, the app that I use for the workouts for my clients has given the opportunity to track food. It's not by MyFitnessPal, it's by my app. So it's a little different in setup. I'm actually not even familiar with MyFitnessPal too much. I know a little bit about it, but never used it. I've only used the one that my app offers. So I can give you some insight into that. But I can say I have been enjoying it. And I will also preface that I think the reason I'm enjoying it is because I've healed my relationship with food. I no longer restrict myself. I no longer base my worth off of what I'm eating. I no longer see food as being good or bad. So I think that's a big point is that it's a comfortable thing for me to do because I feel comfortable with food. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode. But I am enjoying it because I really get to see the habits that I've been creating since getting my nutrition certification, how they've really impacted my eating and my habits. And it's really interesting. I had talked about this a little bit on my Instagram. So I'm sorry to repeat myself if you've seen this, but on my stories, I mentioned that my TDEE calculation, which is energy total daily energy expenditure, which bases my calorie count on physiology and my activity levels. It actually is 2,200 calories calculated on paper, but my eating habits based on eating every 3 to 4 hours and based on my hunger cues and just everything as a whole, actually, I was eating upwards of 2,500 to 2,600 on some days of calories because that is what my body needed to feel good. And it just goes to show that, on paper, it might look a certain way, but it's okay to trust your body because those are the days when I was eating that I felt my best. And I know that sounds scary. And as I mentioned, especially if you restricted in the past like I did, it's scary to think, but I've really learned that trusting my body's cues really does help. And I really have seen that strength training is a really big component of that. I think that my 2,200 mark would make more sense if I wasn't strength training. But when you're trying to build muscle and strength train and to get strong, it's even when you're not in like a muscle building phase as a goal, it just requires, it's metabolically expensive. So that means it needs more energy. It's just requiring that fuel. So it's honestly not a big surprise to me that I need more in a day, but it's really eye-opening and it's actually kind of cool because I feel, like just eat. It's not something to be afraid of. I was afraid for it for so long, and now I'm not afraid to eat. So it's really freeing that way. But enough about me. I want to talk about, first of all, starting off with the question, should you track calories and macros? Now, first of all, the should, I want to take the should out of there because it is totally up to you. And that's why it depends really on two things. It depends on how would tracking your calories and your macros make you feel about your health journey, and what is your goal. So let's dive into that a little bit. So first of all, if tracking calories and macros is going to make you feel crappy about your health journey and it's burdensome, or it causes a bunch of feelings to come up about food, then I would say probably not. And also, what is your goal at the current time? Is it strictly, just trying to eat majority of the day nutritious foods, and then parts of the day having those things that really satisfy you? Or do you have a specific goal in mind, like wanting to build muscle, or in the instance of fat loss? You have to kind of look at that. Or are your goals, you're like, hey, yeah, I'd like to track because I'd like to see if I am having a good majority of nutritious food during the day. Our lives are so busy. We have so many competing priorities. So to reflect on what we've eaten throughout the day without tracking it is kind of chaos in our brain. It's just too much mental work. So to be able to put it in an app where you can actually like see it, and it's honestly super fast because you're not having to write things out. You're really not having to break anything down. It does it all for you, which is really awesome. So it really depends on that. It's totally dependent on those two things. And you don't have to feel like you should do anything. You get to personalize your health journey, and it's truly up to you. So it's definitely not an absolute must. I would say it is totally personal preference. So let's get into some of the benefits when it comes to tracking. One of the first ones is that you get a really good idea of how much fuel you need each day and if you're meeting those requirements with both energy, so your calories, and your macronutrients. So for my case, that was really the truth. Is I thought that I was meeting those calorie needs. I thought, okay, yeah, I'm probably hitting that. Like, I was I was just kind of following what I learned, and I was feeling good and everything, and I thought I'm meeting those needs at 2200 mark. But for me to see that I'm actually eating upwards of that 2500 mark was just mind blowing to me. So now I have a good idea of what my body actually needs. So I'm not basing it off of just that number in my calculation. I'm basing it off of what I've tracked in my food. So you get to know your body better, and with time you're actually probably not even going to need the food tracker anymore, because you just know how those needs are met each day. You have a good idea. And generally, I would say most people eat a lot of the same things. Lots of people just have specific food preferences. And, you know, it's easy to eat a lot of the same things. So that's the really cool part too, is that you're meeting the requirements you need. So then a question that comes up too is, like I mentioned, hunger cues. And this is again where things come into play, where the food tracker isn't a total necessity. I really think the biggest factors we need to focus on when it comes to food, specifically health wise, and specifically making making your body feel balanced and achieving that homeostasis we talked about in the body composition series, which if you haven't listened to that one, definitely check it out. But to achieve that balance, I really do think that it is about following the idea of eating every 3 to 4 hours a carb, protein, and a fat, because that's really going to help you with your blood sugar levels and with your energy levels, and also hunger cues. So if you have a meal and you're like, well, I could probably eat a little bit more, then listen to those hunger cues. Or if you had a snack, I've had several instances where I'll have a snack in the afternoon and it's approaching supper time and I am hungry again. Even after my snack, I will go and I will grab something else. I will have something else, because if I wait until supper, I'm telling you, I will go in a crazy, like I will just overdo it. So I listen to those cues and it's amazing. My body is telling me something, so I follow that cue. So that's where the food tracker, it's giving you the idea of what you're requiring for the numbers. And I think that it's still a good idea to listen to those cues. So kind of working them hand in hand is an awesome way to do it. It's also helpful when you are trying to achieve specific goals, like I mentioned, so fat loss or muscle building. And the reason is because with those goals, you will need either a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus. And in order to really understand what that's going to look like for you, you do need to have an idea of what your daily calories in your homeostasis or your balance looks like. So, for myself, if 2,500 calories is how I'm feeling nourished, if I were to go into a calorie deficit, I generally recommend 100 to 300 calories, because that's a very manageable and less stressful calorie deficit. So my deficit would be, if I'm starting out at 2,500 calories, then I would go down to 2,200 calories at the very least. That is the least amount of calories I would go to with a calorie deficit. And you will start to know those changes, because as your body adapts to your homeostasis, what you are eating on a day-to-day basis, that little deficit is going to really make a difference. So then again, if I would do a surplus, I'm looking at upwards of 2,800 calories, potentially 2,900. So that really helps to understand kind of where you want to go from there. And then when you are tracking, when you're in either a deficit or a surplus, it's really going to be a little more accurate than if you were just guessing. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing that it's really helpful with is your macros, because surprisingly enough, I thought I was eating a good amount of protein, but I actually am not eating as much as I thought I was. And protein is huge because it repairs the muscles, it helps with recovery. So for me to know that I need to increase my protein intake was really helpful, because now I really focus on that, because I know I'm hitting my carbs and my fats, but I need to actively try to incorporate more protein in order to feel my best and to recover my body. So it tells you what your body needs, which is awesome as well. Also, again, in those times of both the deficit and the surplus, protein is huge. So you're going to see if you're reaching those percentages that are recommended for that time. And like I said, you're not playing a guessing game, which is really nice with a food tracker. You're really seeing what's going in to your body each day. And you can gauge too, like on some days where you didn't hit your percentage or your calories per day, you can see, did I feel good that day? How was I? How were my energy levels? How was I feeling? That type of thing. So it's really helpful that way. And I think too, it's important to not get super attached to numbers. If you are, trying to hit that 2,500 mark, not to get too attached to making sure you do every day. There's going to be days where you just don't, and that's okay. But you know that that number is when you feel your best. And that's a good target to have. But it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be exact. It doesn't need to, there's really no set in stone. And I do recommend to my clients too, if, I give you that number, we calculate that number with my clients. And if you reach that number during the day and you're still hungry, please eat more, because like I said, your body has signals for a reason and it tells you things. So listen to your body. So now that we've talked about the benefits, let's go into some of the cons with tracking. And I think one of the biggest and obvious ones is that it can trigger obsession and it really can play with your mind. I know that that's definitely a big thing. And especially if you've had, a history with diets, or like I did with restriction, it can definitely bring up those emotions and it can really become that obsession. It's definitely something that you need to, if you're wanting to do it, it's something you do need to be thinking about during the day. Otherwise, if you're not tracking the entire day, it's really hard to get a good picture. So, because it's going to be on your mind a lot, it's just something to keep in mind that if you decide to go with that route, it can cause that trigger. So, just to be cautious of that and really assess if this is, where you want to head in this season of your life. Maybe food tracking is something you want to do down the road. Maybe first you just want to focus on health and just really getting a good relationship with food and fitness and feeling really comfortable with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And another con too is something I mentioned again, is it's an extra step to remember each day. So it's an extra part of the to-do list and something that we have to check mark. And I think that if you're in the beginning stages of your journey and you're trying to create healthy habits, I would say this isn't one of the first ones you want to do. Just because it is that extra step. It's one extra thing you have to remember each day on top of your workouts, on top of everything else you're trying to incorporate. So I think this is something that you should feel ready for and good about. So just to keep that in mind. And then finally, the last con is it's not 100% accurate. And it's certainly more accurate than guessing, but there's just no way to get a complete accurate picture of what you are consuming each day. There are going to be times where you forget to input something, or that maybe it doesn't have it on the list when you're typing it out, so you have to custom input it. So then things are kind of, it's like a guessing game. There's a lot of like whole foods, like your potatoes and your veggies and your fruits and stuff, that they can't necessarily accurately gauge because they don't have a barcode, which is a big part of the accuracy. Is they're actually able to, you're scanning a barcode on a product and it can give you an exact list. But with fruits and vegetables, that's a little harder to do. So accuracy is not the 100%. So it's not going to be something that we should be too focused on. It's not something that we should rely heavily on. But again, it gives you a good idea. It brings you closer than just guessing. So some things to keep in mind is some food tracking apps that I have heard of. Again, I don't know much about the other ones because I personally haven't used them, but I know some things about them. And I've heard that some actually suggest specific amounts of calories to you. And my suggestion is to not go by these numbers, just because they actually aren't basing it on your own custom needs based on your physiology and your activity levels. A lot of them are basically relating to common diets. So you're going to see 1,200 calories floating around a lot. You're going to see those numbers, and those just aren't enough. That's not enough calories. So don't let the app choose your calorie count for you. I highly suggest working either with somebody who is a professional in the field who can help you determine your number, or I would say when you're starting off with your food tracking, base it off of hunger cues and just track what you're eating and how you're staying nourished. So instead of focusing on a number, just focus on feeling nourished and feeling full, satisfied, have energy, and balance. then you can kind of see throughout, I would say give it 2 weeks as a really good indication of kind of where your number is. And you're going to get a good idea of what you need each day. So I would recommend that if you're just starting off and if you're doing it on your own. Don't base it off of the app doing it for you. It's just not a good situation. You can always try food tracking and see if it works for you, if it's something that really adds to your health journey, if it's something that you're enjoying. But if it doesn't, if it makes you really anxious or upset or discourages you, I would say ditch it. I really would. I think that above all, food tracking is not the end all be all. I think above all, your mental health is the most important, and everything else will follow after that. So, mental health is really key. Feeling good about food, feeling good about fitness, feeling good about health, feeling good in general. That's the most important. Food tracking is just a tool, it's not the core, it's not what you absolutely need. So, what I do for my clients is if this is how they feel, if they're like, food tracking is not for me, I'm good. So, what I do if that's the case is I offer them a sample eating day of the amount of calories we calculated. And that gives them a really good idea of what their day can look like. I don't make them follow that specifically, it is in no way a meal plan. It's not that you have to eat that every day. It just gives you a good idea because I think sometimes when we think about the amount of calories, we think about it less. We always think about less than more. So it's really cool to show them you can eat, like you can eat. You don't have to deprive yourself. So I offer that to them so that they can at least get a good picture of what a day could look like. So that's an option that I do if meal tracking is not for them. And they find it quite helpful. Which I've also been asked too if I provide meal plans. And the answer to that is no, which I know often when there is a specific goal in mind. Specifically, I find this more so with fat loss, that a meal plan is something that offers comfort just because it's first of all, it's very common in most diets is a meal plan, but I think it also offers a level of comfortability because um you're not, like I said, guessing, and it's it takes the brain work out of it. But with this one specifically, with food and nutrition, I like taking the guesswork out of fitness because I think we all kind of have a pretty good foundation when it comes to fitness, and workouts are always, they're only one part of your day. They're 30 to 45 minutes, and they're 3 to 5 days a week. It's just a different concept. Food is literally almost every 3 to 4 hours of your day. My idea with this is to provide my clients with the foundations. I really like to get them to take nutrition into their own hands. I will plan their workouts and give them a training, a specific plan for fitness. But I don't like to give them something specific for nutrition because, first of all, we all have different food preferences. There are some foods that we like more than others. And based on what your day looks like, I work from home, so I can cook. I have everything available to me here. Whereas many of you probably work on the job, work in an office. So you probably have to pack lunches, which is more difficult. So everyone has different circumstances. It looks differently for everybody. And because it looks differently for everybody, the whole point is to create something that's going to work for you and for your lifestyle. So, me creating a plan is not going to help you to stick to it because, first of all, you may not like the foods I choose. Second of all, you're not really learning the core foundations. So, on those days where you're like, I don't really want to follow this, it's going to be tough because you're going to be like, well, now what do I do? So, and third of all, do you really want to stick to that forever? Probably not. Me personally, I wouldn't want to have to stick to a plan with my food every day for the rest of my life. That just would not work for me. So you really have to take those factors into consideration. So, like I said, generally, what I do is I give my clients a good foundation of what nutrition can look like to them each day, what to focus on and what to not focus on, because there's such a thing as micro choices and macro choices. So choices that are going to really affect the big picture and choices that really won't affect the picture at all. So helping them determine which choices are yes, those are the game-changing choices, and what choices really don't need to be worried about. So that also simplifies things, takes the brain power out of it. But I really want to give the knowledge because I think that's way more effective. And like I said, you'll stick to what you enjoy longer than you'll stick to what I enjoy or what I prescribe in a meal plan. So the answer is no. So that is kind of a roundup of what I have for the episode today. I'm going to go through some key takeaways just to kind of review the episode. So, the question of should I track my calories and my macros? The answer is personal choice. It is totally dependent on what you feel comfortable with. It is not a end all be all type situation. It is definitely personal preference and how you feel about doing it. Also, gauging how you're responding to it. If it's stressing you out more than it's helping you, get rid of it. Don't worry about it. Focus on eating 80% nutritious and 20% of whatever is satisfying to you throughout the day. If you're not interested in food tracking, that is a great way to approach nutrition. And also, food tracking is helpful for specific goals if you have fat loss or muscle building in mind. So, if you feel like you got to a good place with health overall and, even your relationship with food and fitness, then I would say it's a great tool to help you with those phases and with those goals. Also, to remember, it's not a 100% accurate thing. There are always variables involved, so don't get too attached to the numbers and to the specifics. And then at the end of the day, health is health. Focus on that first. This is an additional tool. This is an accessory. This is a bell and whistle of your health journey. It's not a nut and bolt. So by that I mean it's not absolutely necessary. Your nuts and bolts are how you feel overall, your health markers, which if you don't know what those are, definitely listen to the body composition series. That will definitely tell you. And just engaging in movement, whatever that looks like for you. I would say strength training is really important, but in whatever way that looks to you. So those are your nuts and bolts. And also your mental health, huge. Food tracking is one of those little additional like sprinkles on top of the cake that it's like cool, but it's not absolutely necessary in my personal opinion. So that is the roundup of it. I hope that this episode was helpful for you guys. If you have questions, you don't have to hesitate to contact me. Reach out on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at jess.coleman, and that's KOHLMAN. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'd love to discuss it further. And I really hope you're having a great day, and I look forward to the next episode.